The blood had already dried on Zelda Jefferson's split lip by the time she stumbled past the last weathered fence post, marking the edge of Golden, Colorado, her feet bare and bleeding against the dusty road that stretched endlessly toward the distant mountains in the spring of 1876. She had been walking since dawn, since Marcus had finally done what he had threatened to do for months and taken everything, the small savings she had hidden in the flour tin, the silver locket her mother had given her, even the shoes off her feet before he rode away laughing with that saloon woman from Denver, perched behind him on his horse. The bruises on her arms were purple and yellow, some fresh from last night and others fading reminders of the 3 years she had spent as Marcus Jefferson's wife. 3 years of hoping he would change, of making excuses, of believing his apologies until the apologies stopped coming altogether. The sun beat down mercilessly on the back of her neck as she kept walking, not knowing where she was going, only knowing she could not stay in that cabin another moment, could not wait for him to come back if he ever did. Her cotton dress was torn at the shoulder where he had grabbed her, and her dark hair hung loose and tangled down her back. She was 23 years old and felt ancient, felt used up and discarded like the empty whiskey bottles Marcus left scattered across their floor. The road blurred before her eyes, whether from tears or exhaustion or the relentless sun she could not say. She did not hear the horse approaching until it was nearly upon her, the steady rhythm of hooves on packed dirt cutting through the haze of her thoughts. Zelda stepped to the side of the road without looking up, expecting whoever it was to pass her by as decent folk tended to do when they saw a woman in her condition, assuming she had earned her bruises somehow, assuming she deserved whatever had happened to her. But the horse slowed, then stopped entirely and a shadow fell across her path. "Madam," the voice was deep and hesitant, concerned in a way that made something crack open in her chest. "Are you all right?" Zelda looked up slowly, squinting against the brightness of the sky. The man sat astride a sturdy chestnut mare, his broad-brimmed hat casting his face in shadow, but she could see the strong line of his jaw, the way his eyes widened as he took in her appearance. He was perhaps 27 or 28, with sun-bronzed skin and dark hair that curled slightly at the collar of his dusty shirt. Everything about him spoke of hard work and honest living, from his worn leather vest to the rope coiled neatly at his saddle. "I am managing," she said, the words coming out rougher than she intended, her throat dry as desert sand. She tried to sound dignified despite everything, despite the fact that she was barefoot and bleeding and marked with evidence of her shame. The cowboy swung down from his horse in one fluid motion, his boots hitting the ground with a soft thud. Up close, she could see the concern etched deep in his features, the way his hands hung at his sides as though he wanted to help but did not know how without frightening her further. "You are hurt," he said simply, stating the obvious because what else could he say? "And you have no shoes." "My husband took them," Zelda heard herself say, then wondered why she had spoken the truth so baldly to this stranger. "He took everything." Something shifted in the cowboy's expression, a hardness entering his eyes that had nothing to do with her and everything to do with the man who had left her this way. "Where are you headed?" "Anywhere," she said. "Nowhere. I have not decided yet." He glanced down the road, then back at her, then seemed to come to some internal decision. "My name is Garrett Nash. I have a ranch about 5 miles north of here. It is not much, but it is clean and safe, and my sister Hannah lives there too, so you would not be alone with just me if that concerns you. You could rest there, get cleaned up, have a decent meal. After that, if you want to move on, I will take you wherever you need to go, but right now you look about ready to collapse." Zelda studied him, this Garrett Nash with his honest eyes and careful words, trying to find the trap, the angle, the thing he would want from her in return. Men always wanted something, but she was so tired and her feet hurt so badly, and the thought of walking another mile made her want to simply lie down in the dirt and give up entirely. "Why would you help me? You do not know me." "Do I need to know you to see you are in trouble?" Garrett asked quietly. "My mama raised me to help folks who need helping. That is all this is." There was something in his voice, a steadiness that made her want to believe him even as every instinct screamed that trusting men led nowhere good. But what choice did she have, really? She could walk until she collapsed, or she could accept help from this stranger and hope he was different from Marcus, hope that not every man in the world was cruel. "All right," she whispered. "Thank you." Garrett nodded once, then moved to his horse and began untying his bedroll. He shook out the blanket it contained and approached her slowly, as one might approach a spooked animal, and draped it gently around her shoulders despite the warmth of the day, covering the torn fabric of her dress. Then he pulled off his own boots, dusty and well-worn but sturdy, and held them out to her. "They will be too big, but better than nothing." "I cannot take your boots," Zelda protested, but he was already kneeling in the dirt before her, and she realized with a shock that he meant to put them on her feet himself. "You can, and you will," he said firmly but not unkindly. "I have another pair at home, and I can ride without them just fine. Your feet are bleeding." She let him slip the boots onto her feet, feeling the rough calluses on his hands as he worked gently, carefully, avoiding the worst of her cuts and scrapes. The boots were enormous on her, swallowing her feet and calves, but he was right that they were better than nothing. When he stood, she saw that his feet were bare now, and something about that sacrifice, small as it was, made her throat tighten with unexpected emotion. Garrett swung back onto his horse, then reached down to her. "Can you ride? I can pull you up behind me." Zelda grasped his outstretched hand, feeling the strength in his grip as he hauled her up effortlessly to sit behind his saddle. She hesitated, then wrapped her arms around his waist because there was nothing else to hold onto, feeling the solid warmth of him through his shirt, the steady rise and fall of his breathing. He smelled of horses and leather and honest sweat, clean smells, good smells, nothing like the sour whiskey stench that had clung to Marcus. "Hold tight," Garrett said, and urged his mare into an easy walk, heading north across the rolling grassland toward the mountains that rose like sentinels in the distance. They rode in silence for a while, and Zelda found herself relaxing slightly against his back despite herself, lulled by the rhythmic gait of the horse and the simple fact that, for the first time in recent memory, she felt safe. The landscape rolled past, endless golden grass dotted with sage and wildflowers, the sky so blue it hurt to look at, and she realized she had barely seen the beauty around her in years, too focused on survival, on anticipating Marcus's moods, on making herself small and unnoticeable in hopes it would spare her his anger. It never had. "How long were you married?" Garrett asked eventually, his voice careful, giving her the option not to answer. 3 years, Zelda said. "Though I suppose I am still married legally. He just left. He did not want me anymore, but I do not think he will bother to divorce me either." What kind of man leaves his wife on the side of the road with nothing? The anger in Garrett's voice was banked but present, controlled. "The kind who never should have been a husband in the first place," Zelda said. "I was 20 when we married. He seemed charming then, attentive. I thought I was lucky. I learned different soon enough." Garrett was quiet for a moment. "I am sorry you went through that. No woman deserves that. No person deserves that." "You do not know me," Zelda repeated, that same wariness creeping back. "You do not know what I might have done to cause it." "Nothing," Garrett said with absolute certainty. You could not have done anything that would justify a man hitting you, taking your belongings, abandoning you. That is on him, not you. I do not need to know you to know that." The simple conviction in his words made something long frozen in Zelda's chest begin to thaw, painful as frostbite warming. She tightened her grip around his waist and said nothing, but she thought perhaps she believed him, or wanted to believe him, which amounted to nearly the same thing. The Nash ranch came into view as they crested a low hill, and Zelda felt her breath catch at the sight of it. It was modest but well kept. A sturdy log house with a wide porch, a barn painted red though the color was fading, a corral where several horses grazed peacefully. And beyond it, all the mountains rising dramatic and purple shadowed against the sky. Smoke rose from the chimney, and as they approached, the front door opened and a woman stepped out onto the porch, shading her eyes against the sun. "Garrett," the woman called, curiosity and concern mingling in her voice. "Who have you got there?" "Someone who needs help, Hannah," Garrett called back as he dismounted, then reached up to help Zelda down. Her legs nearly buckled when her feet hit the ground, exhaustion and pain catching up with her all at once. But Garrett's hand steadied her, his touch gentle but firm. Hannah hurried down from the porch, and Zelda saw she was perhaps 30, with the same dark hair as her brother and kind eyes that took in Zelda's appearance with one sweeping glance. Whatever she saw there made her expression soften immediately. "Oh, honey," she said quietly, and it was the tenderness in her voice that finally broke something in Zelda, that made the tears she had been holding back since dawn spill hot down her cheeks. "I am sorry," Zelda managed, hating herself for crying, for being weak, for accepting help from strangers. "I do not mean to impose." "Hush now," Hannah said, coming forward to take Zelda's arm, supporting her on one side while Garrett supported the other. "You are not imposing. Come inside. Let us get you cleaned up and fed and you can rest. Everything else can wait." They led her into the house, and Zelda had a vague impression of clean wooden floors, simple furniture, a stone fireplace, and windows that let in generous amounts of light. Everything was tidy without being fussy, comfortable, and lived in. Hannah guided her to a chair at the kitchen table while Garrett disappeared, returning a moment later with a basin of water and clean cloths. "Let me see your feet," Hannah said, kneeling before her much as Garrett had done on the road. And Zelda let her remove the oversized boots, let her clean the cuts and scrapes with gentle efficiency, her touch sure but kind. Garrett moved around the kitchen, stoking the fire in the stove, setting a kettle on to boil, slicing bread and cheese and arranging them on a plate that he set before Zelda without comment. "Eat," he said simply. "When did you last have food?" Zelda had to think about it. "Yesterday morning, I think." She reached for the bread with trembling hands, and the first bite tasted like salvation. She had not realized how hungry she was until food was in front of her, and she ate with single-minded focus while Hannah finished bandaging her feet and moved on to dampening a cloth to clean the cut on her lip, the scrape on her cheekbone that Zelda had nearly forgotten about. "You have bruises," Hannah said quietly, seeing the marks on Zelda's arms, the way she moved carefully as though her ribs hurt. "Do you need me to check anything else? I have some experience with healing. Nothing is broken, I hope. Just bruised," Zelda said. "He was angry last night." "Angrier than usual. I knew I had to leave or next time might be worse." "You were smart to go," Hannah said. "That took courage." Zelda shook her head. "It was not courage, it was desperation. He took everything and left, so there was nothing to stay for anyway." Garrett had been standing by the stove, his arms crossed over his chest, and now he spoke up. "Where is your husband now? Do you know?" "Headed to Denver with some woman from the saloon," Zelda said dully. "I do not know if he plans to come back. I do not care, honestly. I just want to be away from him." "You are safe here," Garrett said, and there was something fierce in his voice, a promise. "He will not bother you here, I will make sure of it." Zelda looked at him, really looked at him, this cowboy who had given her his boots and brought her to his home and was now standing in his kitchen barefoot and determined, offering protection to a woman he had met less than an hour ago. She did not understand him, did not understand this kindness that asked for nothing in return, but she was too tired to question it further. "Thank you," she whispered. Hannah made tea, strong and hot and sweet, and pressed the cup into Zelda's hands. They sat with her while she ate and drank, not pushing conversation, just being present, and gradually Zelda felt some strength returning to her limbs. When she had finished eating, Hannah showed her to a small bedroom at the back of the house, simply furnished with a bed covered in a colorful quilt, a washstand, and a chest of drawers. "This was our younger sister's room," Hannah said. "She got married 2 years ago and moved to her husband's place near Colorado Springs. You can stay here as long as you need. I will bring you some clean clothes. We are about the same size, I think. You should rest now." "I do not want to be a burden," Zelda said, the words automatic, learned from years of trying to make herself smaller, less troublesome. "You are not a burden," Hannah said firmly. "You are a person who needs help and we are happy to give it. That is all. Now rest. We will talk more later." She left, closing the door gently behind her, and Zelda stood alone in the quiet room for a long moment before sinking onto the bed. The mattress was soft, the quilt clean and smelling of sunshine and soap, and she lay down fully dressed because she did not have the energy to do anything else. Within moments, she was asleep, falling into darkness so deep and complete it was almost like dying, except there was no pain in it, only relief. She woke to late afternoon light slanting golden through the window and the sound of voices outside, Garrett and Hannah talking in low tones on the porch. Zelda sat up slowly, her body aching but the desperate exhaustion somewhat eased. Someone had left a pitcher of fresh water and a clean nightgown on the chest of drawers, along with a simple dress and undergarments. She rose and washed as best she could with the basin and water, stripping off her torn dress and seeing the full extent of the bruises that mottled her skin. They would fade, she told herself. They always did. It was the ones inside that never quite healed. She dressed in the borrowed clothes, which fit reasonably well though Hannah was slightly taller, and braided her hair with fingers that still trembled slightly. When she emerged from the bedroom, she found the siblings in the kitchen. Garrett had put his spare boots on, she noticed, and Hannah was stirring something in a pot on the stove that smelled wonderfully of beef and vegetables. "You are awake," Hannah said with a smile. "Good, dinner will be ready soon. How are you feeling?" "Better," Zelda said honestly. "Thank you for the clothes, for everything." Garrett stood from the table where he had been looking over what appeared to be account books. "I was just going to check on the horses. Would you like to come? The fresh air might do you good unless you would rather rest more." Zelda considered, then nodded. Fresh air sounds nice. They walked out together into the golden light of late afternoon, and Zelda breathed deeply of the clean mountain air, feeling it fill her lungs, clear her head. The ranch was peaceful, quiet except for the sound of horses moving in the corral and birds calling from the cottonwoods that lined a creek she could hear, but not quite see. Garrett led her to the corral fence, and several horses came over to investigate, their soft noses extended curiously. "This is Rosie," Garrett said, stroking the chestnut mare he had been riding earlier. "She is the one who found you, really. And that big bay is Duke, and the paint is called Patches because, well, obvious reasons." Zelda reached out tentatively to touch Rosie's soft nose, and the mare wafted into her palm warm breath and gentle curiosity. "They are beautiful," she said. "They are good animals," Garrett agreed. Better than most people I have met, if I am being honest. More trustworthy, certainly. You do not trust easily? Zelda asked, glancing at him. He was quiet for a moment, leaning his forearms on the fence rail, his gaze on the distant mountains. I trust actions more than words. Talk is cheap. What people do, how they treat others when there is nothing to gain from it, that is what matters. And you help strangers because that is what you do? Zelda asked. That is the action that defines you. Garrett looked at her then, his eyes steady and serious. I help people who need help because I would want someone to do the same for my sister if she were ever in trouble. It is as simple as that. The world is hard enough without us making it harder for each other. The world is full of people who do not think that way, Zelda said quietly. I know, Garrett said, but that does not mean I have to be one of them. They stood in comfortable silence for a while, watching the horses, and Zelda felt something unknotting inside her, some tight coil of fear and vigilance beginning to loosen. This place, these people, they were different from anything she had known in recent years. She did not know yet if she could trust it, but she wanted to desperately. Dinner was a warm, pleasant affair, the three of them sitting around the kitchen table eating Hannah's excellent stew and fresh bread. The conversation was easy, unforced, and they asked her questions about herself that had nothing to do with Marcus or what had happened to her. Where was she from originally? Virginia, she told them. How had she ended up in Colorado? She had come west with her parents when she was 17, seeking new opportunities after the war had left their farm in ruins. Her parents had died of fever the first winter, and she had been alone and struggling when she met Marcus. He had seemed like an answer to her prayers then, stable and capable and willing to marry her. She had learned too late what kind of man he truly was. You have any other family? Hannah asked gently. Zelda shook her head. Not that I know of. There might be distant cousins back east, but no one I was close to. It has been just me for a long time now. Well, you have us now, Hannah said firmly, for as long as you want or need. After dinner, they sat on the porch in the cooling evening air, and Hannah brought out a guitar and played soft, sweet melodies while the sun set in spectacular fashion, painting the sky orange and pink and purple. Garrett sat in a rocking chair whittling a piece of wood, and Zelda simply sat and listened and felt peace settle over her like a blanket. She could not remember the last time she had felt this way, safe and welcome and unburdened, and she knew it could not last forever, but she would take it for as long as it was offered. The days that followed developed their own rhythm. Zelda recovered slowly, her cuts healing and her bruises fading from purple to green to yellow. She insisted on helping around the house despite Hannah's protests that she should rest, needing to feel useful, to earn her keep somehow. She cooked and cleaned and mended clothes, discovering that domesticity felt different when it was a choice rather than an obligation enforced with fists and harsh words. Hannah worked alongside her, and they talked easily, becoming friends in the natural way of women who understood hardship. Garrett was often out during the day working the ranch, repairing fences or tending the horses or riding into Golden to buy supplies. But he was always back for dinner, and Zelda found herself watching for him as the afternoon lengthened, found herself smiling when she heard his boots on the porch. He treated her with unfailing respect and kindness, never pressing too close, never making her uncomfortable, but she could feel his eyes on her sometimes, thoughtful and warm, and she did not mind it. One morning about 2 weeks after her arrival, Garrett asked if she wanted to ride out with him to check on the cattle in the far pasture. "It is beautiful country out there," he said, "and you look like you could use some adventure. You have been cooped up here long enough." Zelda agreed readily, eager to see more of the ranch, to feel the sun on her face and the wind in her hair. Garrett saddled Rosie for himself, and a gentle mare called Daisy for Zelda, and they rode out into the morning with the world spread vast and golden around them. He was right that it was beautiful, the land rolling away to the mountains, endless grass and scattered groves of aspen whose leaves flickered silver in the breeze. They rode in comfortable silence for a while before Garrett spoke. "You seem better. Happier, maybe." "I am," Zelda said. "It is easier to be happy when you are not afraid all the time." "Were you afraid?" "Of him? Always," she admitted. "Even when he was in a good mood, I was afraid because I never knew when it would turn. It was like living with a storm that could break at any moment. You learn to watch the sky constantly to prepare for lightning." "You do not have to live that way anymore," Garrett said. "I know," Zelda said. "Or I am starting to know it. It is strange, getting used to feeling safe. Sometimes I catch myself bracing for something bad to happen, and then nothing does, and I do not know what to do with that." "You will learn," Garrett said quietly. "It takes time, I imagine, to undo that kind of damage, but you have time. You have all the time you need." They reached the cattle, a small herd grazing peacefully in a meadow bordered by a clear running creek, and Garrett sat his horse surveying them with the practiced eye of a man who knew his business. "They look good," he said with satisfaction. "Healthy. We should have some good calves this spring." "How long have you had this ranch?" Zelda asked. 5 years, Garrett said. "Our parents had a place further east, but when they died, Hannah and I decided to start fresh. We sold that land and bought this. It has been hard work building it up, but it is ours, you know. We worked for it, earned it. That means something." "It is a good place," Zelda said. "You should be proud." "I am," Garrett said. Then, after a pause, "Would you want to stay? Long term, I mean. We could use another hand around the place, and Hannah loves having another woman around." "You would earn your keep, of course. I would pay you a fair wage for the work. You could save up, have your own money, decide what you want to do from there." Zelda looked at him, this good man who kept surprising her with his decency. "You do not have to do that. You have already done so much." "I am not doing it out of charity," Garrett said. "Well, not just charity. You are a hard worker, and we genuinely could use the help. And I think you need a place to land for a while, somewhere you can heal and figure out your next move. It seems like it would benefit everyone. What do you say?" Zelda thought about it, about having a place, a purpose, a way to build something of her own. "I would like that," she said finally. "Very much. Thank you, Garrett," he smiled, a genuine warm smile that reached his eyes and made him look younger, less careworn. "Good. That is settled then. Welcome to the Nash Ranch, Zelda Jefferson." "Zelda Jensen," she corrected without thinking. "I do not want his name anymore." Garrett nodded, understanding. "Zelda Jensen, then. Welcome home." The word hung in the air between them, full of promise and possibility, and Zelda felt tears prick her eyes, but she blinked them back and smiled instead, feeling something like hope unfurl in her chest for the first time in longer than she could remember. The summer months passed in a blur of work and healing and slow, steady growing. Zelda learned the rhythms of ranch life, the early mornings and long days, the satisfaction of physical labor and seeing tangible results. She learned to ride better, to rope, to help with the cattle and the horses. Her hands grew calloused, and her skin browned in the sun, and she felt herself becoming stronger, not just physically, but in some fundamental way she could not quite name. She was becoming herself again, or perhaps becoming someone new, someone she had never had the chance to be. Garrett was always there, teaching her, working alongside her, and she found herself drawn to him in ways that both thrilled and terrified her. He was nothing like Marcus, nothing like any man she had known. He was patient and kind, with a quiet strength that never tipped into cruelty, a confidence that did not need to prove itself through domination. He made her laugh with his dry humor, and he listened when she talked, really listened as though her words mattered. She caught herself thinking about him at odd moments, wondering what he was doing when he was out of sight, feeling her heart lift when he came into view. It was dangerous, she knew, to care for him. She was still legally married, still technically another man's wife even though Marcus had abandoned her. And more than that, she was damaged, broken in ways she was not sure could be fully repaired. What did she have to offer a man like Garrett Nash, a good man who deserved someone whole and uncomplicated? But her heart did not seem to care about logic or caution, and as the weeks turned into months, she felt herself falling in love despite every reason not to. If Garrett felt the same, he gave no obvious sign. He was always proper, always respectful, maintaining a careful distance even as his eyes betrayed warmth and something deeper when he looked at her. They spent long hours together, riding the ranch or working in the barn or sitting on the porch in the evenings, and the conversation flowed easily between them, comfortable and genuine. They talked about everything and nothing, their childhoods and their dreams, their favorite books and the places they hoped to see someday. And with every conversation, Zelda felt the connection between them deepening, becoming something she could not ignore. One evening in late August, as they sat on the porch watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky, Garrett finally spoke the words that had been building between them for months. "Zelda," he said quietly, his voice rough with emotion. "I need to tell you something, and I hope it does not make you uncomfortable or make you want to leave, but I cannot keep it in anymore." Zelda's heart began to pound, hope and fear tangling together. "What is it?" Garrett turned to look at her, his eyes dark and serious in the twilight. "I care about you, more than I should probably, given your situation. But I have tried to fight it and I cannot. You are in my thoughts all the time. When I am out working, I am thinking about what you might find funny about it so I can tell you later. When something good happens, you are the first person I want to share it with, and when I see you smile, really smile, it makes everything else worth it." Zelda felt tears gathering, but they were not sad tears. "Garrett," she whispered, "I know you are still married legally," he continued. "And I know you have been through hell, and maybe the last thing you need is some cowboy telling you he is falling in love with you. But I am, Zelda. I am falling in love with you, and I needed you to know, even if you cannot or do not feel the same way." "Cannot?" Zelda repeated, her voice breaking. "Garrett, I have been falling in love with you for months. I just did not think I had the right to. I did not think someone like you could want someone like me." Garrett reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand in his. His palm was warm and rough with calluses, solid and real. "Someone like you," he said softly, "is brave and strong and kind. Someone like you survived something that would have broken a lot of people, and you are still here, still fighting, still capable of joy and laughter. Why would I not want that? Why would I not want you?" Zelda squeezed his hand, holding on like a lifeline. "I am still married. Marcus could come back. And even if he does not, getting a divorce, it takes time and money, and I do not even know where he is." "Then we will find him," Garrett said. "Or we will get a legal separation, or whatever we need to do. I do not care how long it takes, Zelda. I will wait as long as I have to. But I want you to know that I am here, and I am not going anywhere, and when you are free, truly free, I want to court you properly and eventually, if you will have me, marry you." "You want to marry me?" Zelda asked, hardly daring to believe it. "More than I have ever wanted anything," Garrett said. "But only when you are ready, only when it is right. There is no rush. I just wanted you to know where my heart is." Zelda brought his hand to her cheek, pressing her face against his palm, letting herself sink into the warmth and safety of his touch. "My heart is in the same place," she said. I love you, Garrett Nash. I think I have loved you since the day you gave me your boots." He laughed, a soft, surprised sound, and then he was leaning in slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away, and when she did not, when she leaned in to meet him, his lips touched hers in a kiss so gentle and sweet it made her ache. It was nothing like Marcus's rough, claiming kisses, nothing like the bruising force she had learned to endure. This was tender, asking rather than taking, a promise rather than a demand. She kissed him back, pouring all her hope and love and gratitude into it, and when they finally pulled apart, they were both smiling. "We will figure it out," Garrett said, resting his forehead against hers. "All of it. Together." "Together," Zelda agreed, and the word felt like a vow. The next morning, Garrett rode into Golden to speak with a lawyer about Zelda's situation. He returned hours later with news both good and challenging. The lawyer had explained that because Marcus had abandoned her, Zelda had grounds for divorce, but they would need to locate him to serve papers, or failing that, wait a certain period and petition for divorce based on desertion. It would take time and some expense, but it was possible. "He thinks we should hire someone to track Marcus down," Garrett said as they sat at the kitchen table, Hannah having tactfully excused herself to give them privacy. "A man who specializes in finding people. It will be faster than waiting out the desertion period, which could be a year or more." "That will cost money," Zelda said. "Money I do not have." "I have money," Garrett said. "And before you argue, this is an investment in our future. Let me do this, please." Zelda wanted to protest, wanted to maintain her independence, but she also wanted to be free of Marcus, wanted to move forward with her life and with Garrett. "All right," she said finally, "but I will pay you back, every cent. It might take time, but I will do it." "You do not have to," Garrett said, but seeing the stubborn set of her jaw, he smiled. "But if it makes you feel better, we can consider it a loan." They hired the investigator, a grizzled former marshal named Tom who had connections throughout Colorado and beyond. He set off to track Marcus's trail, starting in Denver where Zelda said he had been headed. Weeks passed with no word, and then a month, and Zelda tried not to let the waiting gnaw at her. She focused on her work on the ranch, on the quiet joy of being near Garrett and knowing he loved her. They were careful to maintain propriety, knowing that small towns talked and Zelda's reputation was already precarious given her circumstances. But they stole moments together, walks along the creek in the evenings, conversations in the barn while doing chores, touches that lingered just a moment longer than necessary. Hannah watched them with approval and obvious affection, happy to see her brother content in a way he had not been in years. In early October, Tom returned with news. He had found Marcus in a saloon in Pueblo, drunk and broke and already abandoned by the woman he had run off with. He had served the divorce papers personally, and Marcus, too far gone to care, had signed them without argument. "He said to tell you that you were welcome to your freedom," Tom reported, his tone suggesting he had opinions about Marcus that he was keeping to himself. "The papers have been filed with the court. You should have your legal divorce within a few weeks." Zelda felt light-headed with relief, hardly able to believe it could be so simple after fearing it would be impossible. He just signed. No fight. He was not in any condition to fight, Tom said. "And I got the impression he was glad to be rid of the responsibility, if you will pardon me saying so. Some men should never marry." "Thank you," Zelda said fervently. "Thank you so much." When Tom had gone, Garrett swept Zelda into his arms and spun her around, both of them laughing with pure joy. "You are going to be free," he said, setting her down but keeping his hands on her waist. "Finally, truly free." "We are going to be free," Zelda corrected. "Both of us. Free to have a future." The divorce was finalized in November. the papers arriving by post on a crisp autumn day when the aspen leaves had turned gold and the air smelled of coming winter. Zelda held the document in trembling hands, reading the legal language that declared her marriage to Marcus Jefferson dissolved, that restored her right to her own name and her own life. She was no longer his wife, no longer bound to him in any way. She was simply herself, Zelda Jefferson, free and independent and whole. That evening, Garrett asked her properly to court him, as though the answer was not already obvious, and she said yes with tears streaming down her face. They courted through the winter, a blissfully happy time despite the cold and snow. Garrett was attentive and romantic in ways that still surprised her, bringing her wildflowers he found on his rides, reading to her in the evenings by the fire, teaching her to dance in the kitchen while Hannah played guitar. They talked about their future, the life they would build together, the children they hoped to have someday. Zelda had never imagined she could be this happy, had never known that love could be this easy and joyful and safe. In February, on a bright cold morning with fresh snow sparkling in the sunlight, Garrett proposed. He took her out to the meadow where they had first talked about her staying at the ranch, and he knelt in the snow and pulled out a simple gold ring. "Zelda Jefferson," he said, his breath misting in the cold air, "you are the strongest, bravest, most remarkable woman I have ever known. You have brought light and laughter into my life, and I cannot imagine a future without you in it. Will you marry me? Will you be my wife and my partner and the love of my life?" "Yes," Zelda said, pulling him to his feet and kissing him with all the passion and love she felt. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." They married in April of 1877, a small ceremony in the church in Golden with Hannah and a few close friends as witnesses. Zelda wore a simple white dress that Hannah had helped her sew, and she carried wildflowers from the ranch. Garrett wore his best suit and looked so handsome, it made her heart ache, and when he said his vows, promising to love and cherish and protect her all the days of his life, she believed him utterly and completely. She made her own vows with a steady voice, promising to stand beside him through whatever came, to build a life and a family and a future together. The wedding night was everything she had never known it could be, tender and passionate and entirely different from what she had experienced with Marcus. Garrett was patient and loving, making sure she felt safe and cherished, and for the first time in her life, Zelda understood what it meant to make love rather than simply endure it. Afterward, lying in his arms in the darkness of their bedroom, she cried quiet tears of gratitude and joy, and Garrett held her and understood without her having to explain. Their first year of marriage was filled with hard work and simple pleasures. The ranch prospered under their combined efforts, and they added more cattle and another horse. Hannah stayed on with them, her presence a blessing rather than a burden, and the three of them formed a tight family unit. Zelda learned everything she could about ranching, proving herself capable and strong, and Garrett treated her as a true partner in all things, asking her opinion, trusting her judgment, sharing the load equally. In the spring of 1878, Zelda discovered she was pregnant. The news filled her with joy, and a fear she had not anticipated, memories of Marcus, and how he had been making her worry about bringing a child into the world. But Garrett's reaction banished those fears completely. He was thrilled and tender, his hands gentle on her growing belly, his eyes full of wonder. "We are having a baby," he kept saying, as though he could not quite believe it. "We are going to be parents. Are you happy?" Zelda asked, needing to hear him say it. "Happy does not begin to cover it," Garrett said. "You are giving me the greatest gift, Zelda, a family, a child, everything I could ever want." The pregnancy was not easy, and Zelda was sick through much of the summer, but Garrett and Hannah took care of her with unfailing patience and love. As her belly swelled and the baby grew, Zelda felt a fierce protectiveness rising in her, a determination that this child would know only love and safety, would never experience the fear and pain she had known. She talked to the baby constantly, telling it stories, singing songs, promising it a good life with good people who would always keep it safe. In January of 1879, on a snowy night with the wind howling outside, Zelda went into labor. It was long and difficult, and there were moments when she was certain she could not do it, could not push through the pain. But Garrett was there, holding her hand, encouraging her, and Hannah was there with her calm competence, and together they brought her through. Just before dawn, with the first light creeping through the windows, Zelda gave birth to a healthy baby boy. "He is perfect," Garrett said, tears streaming down his face as he held his son for the first time. "Zelda, he is perfect. What should we name him?" Zelda asked, exhausted but happier than she had ever been, watching her husband cradle their child with such tenderness. "What about James?" Garrett suggested. "James Nash, it was my father's name." "James," Zelda repeated, testing the sound of it. "Yes, James is perfect." Little James was a content baby, and he thrived under the loving attention of his parents and his aunt. Watching Garrett with his son, Zelda fell in love with him all over again. He was a devoted father, patient and playful, changing diapers without complaint and walking the floor with James when he was fussy. He sang to the baby in his rough voice, told him stories about the ranch and the horses, and as James grew and began to smile and laugh, Garrett's joy was almost painful to witness. "I never knew I could love anyone this much," Garrett confessed one night as they lay in bed, James asleep in his cradle nearby. "I love you more than life, Zelda, but seeing him, knowing we made him together, it is overwhelming." "I know," Zelda said, understanding completely. "Sometimes I look at him, and I cannot believe he is ours, that we get to keep him." The years passed in a blur of work and love and watching James grow. He was a bright, curious child, fascinated by everything around him, following his father around the ranch from the time he could walk, asking endless questions. Zelda taught him his letters and numbers, read to him every night, and delighted in his quick mind and kind heart. He had Garrett's dark hair and her green eyes, and he had a sweetness about him that made everyone who met him smile. When James was 3, Zelda discovered she was pregnant again. This time she was less afraid, more confident in her body and in Garrett and in the life they had built. The pregnancy was easier than the first, and in the summer of 1882, she gave birth to a daughter they named Sarah. Sarah was a tiny thing, delicate where James had been sturdy, but she had a will of iron and a set of lungs that made her opinions very clear from the start. "She is fierce," Hannah said, laughing as the baby screamed her displeasure at being put down. "This one is going to keep you on your toes." She was right. Sarah was strong-willed and independent, and as she grew, she proved to be fearless, climbing everything she could reach, demanding to do things herself, refusing help even when she clearly needed it. But she was also affectionate and funny, and she adored her older brother with a devotion that was almost comical. James, for his part, was protective and patient with her, teaching her things and including her in his games, and watching them together made Zelda's heart full to bursting. Life on the ranch was good, better than Zelda had ever dreamed possible. They had their struggles, of course, harsh winters and dry summers and the constant challenges of making a living from the land. But they faced everything together, and every challenge overcome made them stronger. The ranch grew and prospered, and so did their family. When Sarah was 2, Zelda gave birth to another son, whom they named Thomas after the investigator who had helped Zelda gain her freedom. And 3 years after that, another daughter arrived, little Emma, who was gentle and sweet-natured and loved animals with a passion that rivaled her father's. The years were full and rich, marked by small joys and occasional sorrows. Hannah eventually married a neighboring rancher, a good man who treated her well, and though she moved to her own place, she remained close, visiting often and staying involved in the children's lives. Garrett's hair began to show gray at the temples, and Zelda noticed lines around her eyes when she looked in the mirror, but they wore their age well, earned through hard work and honest living. On a warm evening in the summer of 1890, Garrett and Zelda sat on their porch watching their children play in the yard. James was 16 now, tall and strong, and so much like his father it made Zelda catch her breath. Sarah was 8, climbing a tree with more enthusiasm than grace, while Thomas shouted encouragement from below. Little Emma, just 5, was making daisy chains in the grass, her tongue caught between her teeth in concentration. "You remember when we met?" Garrett asked, taking Zelda's hand in his. "When I found you on that road, every detail," Zelda said. "I remember thinking you were going to pass me by like everyone else, and then you stopped." "Best decision I ever made," Garrett said, "stopping for you." "You saved my life," Zelda said quietly. "You gave me everything, Garrett, a home, a family, a future. You gave me myself back." Garrett shook his head. "You saved yourself, Zelda. You had the courage to leave, to keep walking, to trust me enough to take my hand. I just gave you a place to land. Everything else, everything good that has happened, that is because of who you are and what you brought into my life." "We saved each other then," Zelda said, leaning her head on his shoulder. "How about that?" "I can live with that," Garrett said, kissing the top of her head. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun paint the sky in shades of gold and rose, watching their children play in the long summer twilight. James had climbed the tree to help Sarah down, and Thomas was showing Emma how to make a longer daisy chain, his patience with his little sister endless. This was their legacy, Zelda thought, this love and safety and joy. These children who would grow up knowing they were wanted and cherished, who would never know what it was to be afraid in their own home, who would carry forward the love she and Garrett had built from the ashes of her worst moments. "I love you," she said, the words as true now as they had been that first time she had spoken them, perhaps even more true for having been tested and proven through years of living. "I love you too," Garrett said, "today and always." The children's laughter rang out across the yard, bright and clear, and Zelda smiled. Content in a way she had never imagined possible 14 years ago, when she had been walking barefoot down a dusty road with nothing but bruises and despair. That woman felt like a stranger now, someone from another life entirely, though Zelda knew she was still there, part of her story, part of what had made her strong enough to embrace happiness when it came. As full darkness fell and the children were called inside for bed, Zelda and Garrett remained on the porch for a while longer, holding hands and watching the stars emerge one by one in the vast Colorado sky. They had built something good here, something lasting, and they had years ahead of them still. Years to watch their children grow and have children of their own. Years to work the land they loved and grow old together. It was everything she had never known to hope for, and it was hers, really and truly hers, won through courage and chance, and the kindness of a cowboy who had stopped when he could have ridden past, who had seen someone in need and chosen to help. That choice had changed both their lives, had created this family, this home, this love that would endure long after they were gone. And sitting there in the peaceful darkness with Garrett's hand warm in hers, Zelda knew without doubt that every struggle, every sorrow, every moment of fear and pain had been worth it to arrive at this place, this happiness, this peace. She was exactly where she was meant to be, with exactly the person she was meant to be with, and no matter what tomorrow might bring, they would face it together, as they had faced everything else, with love and courage and unwavering faith in each other. The road that had begun in desperation and pain had led her here, to this porch, this man, this life, and she would not change a single step of the journey because it had brought her home,